Hello.
Good morning or good afternoon. I got that pewter going. Woohoo.
Good deal.
Yeah, yeah. Why am I glowing? Am I glowing? My body is glowing.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
These things happen sometimes.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know what I wanted to ask you. I had no questions until I saw your post about your backyard. And for 20 years, I've been really pissed off that I don't have a backyard.
Ah.
So I will talk about the backyard. I lived in a house for 8 years of my life, married life, and I had a backyard and I loved it. And I would just every morning get out, get my coffee and go outside,
Yeah.
all summer outside in the yard. And every spring I get really crabby because I don't have a backyard. So can you help me manifest a backyard? Thank you.
Careful what you wish for. No.
I know. I thought about that this morning. I said, you know what a backyard means? A lot of work.
Yeah.
I just want to go out into the Garden of Eden and listen to my YouTube gurus and meditate.
Yeah.
And if it will be, if not, that's my lesson.
The main thing, the main thing is just to get outside and enjoy the natural beauty of the outdoors however you can. And I'm talking to myself mostly here.
Yeah.
I got to do it more because every time I do, I'm like, oh yeah, like what am I doing? Why am I not doing this all the time? You know, it's very helpful.
Take the laptop outside. Yeah.
And the just go for a walk, do something, you know. And I heard that sunlight is the best thing you can be doing for yourself for COVID and your immune system in general. You know, just getting sunlight actively destroys any COVID that's anywhere, and it's a very fragile virus in the sunlight. And the vitamin D that produces from the sunlight hitting your hair and skin, the vitamin D is the best thing you can do for yourself during these times. It's the best thing you can do for your immune system. So sunlight, fresh air, the energy of nature, it's all very potently helpful.
It is.
I can't overstress that enough. Yeah. And I'm talking to myself too. I'm telling myself to get outdoors too.
That's all we're doing really, basically. I was trying to talk myself out of it being a desire, you know, but in the dream and the illusion, that's true. They even said the Spanish 19 or the flu 1918.
Yeah.
That the hospitals were so overcrowded, they had put patients outside, and the ones that were outside healed faster.
Yeah. See. So, yeah. Exactly. I didn't know that. That's a good thing to reference because then there's proof of that. Yeah, that's good.
Like that. And cancer patients too. So
yeah, definitely. Anything that requires the immune system to be more strengthened. So even people with AIDS and things like that, I would imagine the sunlight probably helps. I don't know that for sure. I don't know how sunlight interacts with everything, but the immune system in general, it's supposed to be tremendous. And some people do sun gazing and things like that. If you do it safely, I think it could be beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of sun gazing, after my son died in 1998, when I went to the cemetery, there's a cross there. Jesus and Mary, who I'm aware of, is, you know, it's all illusion. There's nothing here really but a movie going on. But they've made apparitions there. The faithful make pilgrimages to the cemetery. And there was a monk praying Divine Mercy. And I thought, I'm going to go up and join him. And I had a cigarette, and then I didn't want to go up there with the cigarettes. So there was the sign, and I placed the cigarette on the sign. I was just going to go up there quick and say a prayer. I had his best friend in the car. And I started to pray Divine Mercy, and the monk said, look at the sun. And I looked up, and it looked like it was exploding. It looked like this big oval cloud.
Wow.
And I looked, and I said, and I was blinded by it. And I said, wow, it's bright. He said, look again, it's spinning. And it was spinning like a pinwheel. And I
Wow.
went, holy cow. He said, it's the miracle of the sun. It happens all the time at Medjugorje. And I went, whoa. And when I came back from the cross, I went to get in the car, and I told Eddie, my son's best friend, what happened. He said, that's nothing. He said, you shouldn't be staring at the sun. And then he said, that's nothing. Look at your cigarette. And my cigarette was floating above the sign. I literally picked it out of
Wow.
the air.
No way.
I picked it out
Whoa.
of the air.
Wow.
Thanks, Mark. He kept an eye on it for me. And I got in the car, and I had a rosary hanging from the visor. And Eddie looks at he goes, how do you work this thing? Anyway, that's my miracle
Wow.
story.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And
And
I've heard that a few times from a few different people about the sun either changing shape or doing some strange thing that doesn't make any logical sense, but they're experiencing it, you know. And it's interesting to see, you know, when it's multiple people experiencing it. So you and the guy are both seeing the sun, you and the other guy are both seeing the cigarette. That makes it more real,
yeah,
even though it's all a dream. It makes it, you know, more like
yeah,
harder to dispute. It's like, okay, maybe I'm crazy and I hallucinated, but no, a room of 40 people just saw the same thing. Well, and now it's a little different then.
well, I even went to my psychiatrist, and I told her what happened. I said, am I losing it? And she said, no, she gets stories all the time. People go to Medjugorje and they see the same thing, and they come back and their rosaries have turned to gold. And she said, no, you're
Whoa.
fine. I go in for an annual checkup now. My mom had
Yeah.
dementia, just to keep track on me.
Yeah.
And well, this was
Wow.
22 years ago. And then the other strange thing, I mean, a lot of strange things happened after he passed. We brought his television set. I was renting a room at the time in a woman's house, and brought out some of his furniture there and his television set, and plugged it in the living room to see if it worked. And before I tell you about this, in his casket, that's when I had the realization that that wasn't Mark. That body was nothing. That Mark
Yeah.
was. I wanted to know where he was.
Right.
But at the casket, his friend took a Varga girl's matchbook. My son collected these, and put them as kind of an Art Deco thing, put it in his hand where they intertwine a rosary. And now back to the living room and the TV set. We turned the TV set on, and suddenly a hand appeared like this, just like this, holding the Varga girl matchbook.
Whoa. On the
Yeah,
TV. Yeah.
on the TV. Yeah, and
Wow.
three of us saw it. Yeah. One person,
Wow.
his best friend, has forgotten the memory because I think it's been too unreal for him to
Yeah.
remember it now. But he did remember it
Wow.
the first few years. So those were just some of the signs. And yeah, it's a very interesting movie. It can be very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's interesting stuff. I always love hearing about people's experiences of just anything out of the ordinary. I love it. Uh, I've kind of devoted
Yeah,
my life to it, and that's what I was doing when I was a seeker. That's pretty much that was my forte. I would look at anything strange or weird, or I like to tell people things they wouldn't have otherwise ever even heard of unless they had met me. You know, that was the kind of I was into all the secret or subtle stuff, you know.
yeah,
That is interesting. I've never, to my knowledge, I can't think of anything like floating or telekinetic in my experience necessarily, but I do interact with electronic objects in a weird way. Like I remember one time I used to work at the library at my university for 3 years. I was a work study for 3 years. I worked there quite a bit. And I'd have a big stack of books, and I'd be walking toward the elevator, and I'd be about to push the button to open the doors. But I also, in the back of my mind, knew I'm carrying all these books.
mhm.
You know, I'm gonna have to push that button. It's kind of a pain. And then the doors of the elevator would just open, and there's nobody in there. And I didn't push anything. And this would happen to me
Whoa,
almost every day, to the point where I just started assuming, okay, the elevators are malfunctioning, and this is just a wild coincidence. This must happen even when I'm not on the floor. Elevators must just open all the time, and there's nobody there, nobody trying to get on without pushing a button. I guess these are just old elevators. So I went about my day, and for 3 years I thought that. And then one day I was talking to somebody who'd worked there for 4 years, even more often than I did. And I said, isn't that weird, the elevator thing? And they said, what are you talking about? I said, you'll be carrying a thing of books and you'll go to push the button and it'll just open. They just look at me like I'm crazy or that I'm lying to them. They look at me kind of funny.
Yeah.
They go, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah. Doesn't that happen to you like every day? And they're like, I've been here 4 years. That's never happened to me once. And then I kind of got chills, up my spine and thinking, and then right as that happened, the closest elevator to us, and I've never seen it do that before or since, it opened and then it slammed itself shut. It opened and it slammed. It's like a ghost movie,
Wow.
And it just kept doing that. We're both just shocked, staring at it. And then something in my mind, I turn to them and I say, watch this. And I put my hand up and I go, stop. And the elevator closes and stops. I was like, whoa. Did not expect any of this to happen, So things like that have happened to me, with like electronic based objects. But I've never seen a teacup float in midair or anything like that. But I have had enough of those weird coincidental electronic object stuff that the energy and the consciousness somehow connected to it. Because you could think it was ghosts, but then at the same time, why is it only interacting with me in that way? So it made me wonder, But I don't think I've told that to more than a handful of people in my life, that story.
Yeah. There is, after all these things started happening to me, I kind of looked into, paranormal and read some books, Von Prague and that said the energy can affect the electrical field very easily. And my father died shortly after that. And my mother said that the stove, or the alarm on the stove, kept beeping and it wouldn't turn off when she turned it off. And I said, that's Dad trying to contact you. Just tell him you got the message, write him and say, okay, got it, Paul. And she did, and it stopped.
Yeah, interesting.
And, then during my Reiki initiation, I think it was, my Reiki master class, I had my phone shut off in the middle of the ceremony. The phone starts ringing. I was so embarrassed. I got up and I turned it off, and then it started ringing again. And I got up and I turned it off and I took it out of the room. And afterwards, I went outside to look at the phone number. There wasn't any telephone number. So I know it was a message.
One time I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and this was years before awakening happened. I was probably in my mid-20s, I think, when this conversation happened. But I was talking to the person on the other end of the line about this very thing, about how awareness can interact with electronic objects and do some weird things. And my voice and my awareness and my presence, if you will, was getting more and more intense and like focused and profound, and all of a sudden he started screaming. And on my end, the phone screen was flashing on and off like this, and I'd never seen it do that before. It was just flashing on and off, and as it's doing that, I hear him screaming, and I'm like, okay, like what's going on your end right now? Because on my end, the screen's just flashing on and off, and it happened to coincide right when you started screaming. Tell me what's going on. He said, you know how I told you half an hour ago that my phone is on 1% and it just wouldn't die, as if this conversation was keeping it going just enough? And I said, yeah. He said, well, now it's charging the phone and it's not plugged in. And we talked for another half hour, so we talked for like an hour while it was on 1%, first of all. But the second half hour, it was actively charging the phone.
Wow.
And it didn't even drop. We ended up getting off the call, in our own time. But he told me the next day, he said, by the way, you owe me $50, as a joke. And I said, why? What happened? He said, you fried my phone. I had to go buy a totally new one. And I said, well, I'm not going to give you the $50 because I didn't consciously do it. It just happened. but that's still crazy. So
Oh my God.
weird
Yeah, I've
things
heard of
have
people
happened, you
that
know.
just that. Yeah.
And it just
Wow.
happened to coincide like while we were talking about that very topic. That's what made it so interesting to me, you know. Makes you wonder.
Wow.
And the same thing with the elevator. While we're talking about that very thing, just out of the blue, just happened to arise in my mind. Like, hey, you ever notice? And that's when the elevators did that weird thing I've never seen them do before. It makes you wonder, like, either someone somewhere can hear you, and you know, I had the funny paranoid thought of like, wouldn't it be funny if it was just like the security team for the library who can see and hear everything? What if they're just pushing buttons, screwing with people? But then I thought, no,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, what would cause that though? What would, I mean, that's what made me bring that up to begin with. It makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder because we really don't have all the details. No matter who we
No.
are, no matter where we think we are, none of us really know. None of
No.
us really know.
Amazing. Amazing. And the other thing, I get it. I made 2 malas.
Oh, uh-huh.
I
Nice.
for my birthday, I sent away to Portugal for mala. I don't know much about mala. And I was on Muji's website, and somebody had made one, and it had the birthstone aquamarine, which is for March. And I
Ah,
said, you know what, I'm going to send for this. I've never made a donation to Muji. I'm gonna, I'm gonna buy this, and this is gonna be my birthday present. And I sent for a picture of him too. And that got me started. I was in a fabric store, and the beads were 70% off. So I went
ah.
berserk. Yeah, and now I'm stringing malas, and I'm learning a little bit about them. Did you ever use the mala beads?
I never used them, but I know quite a bit about them. Yeah. Um, in India, there are certain seeds and certain fruits and certain objects that can hold that energetic charge easier. So in India, we tend to
Mhm.
use something called rudraksha seeds, and base or bodhi seeds are another good option. So any type of seed really has this unique property. Wood has this unique property. Fruits have this unique property. What I'm talking about is the ability to consciously charge an object with this life force energy, Kundalini Shakti energy. And
Mhm.
if you, let's say, you walk into a temple and there's a living master there, they might charge a piece of fruit and then toss it to you and not even tell you that, and then you'll go, oh, how'd they know I was hungry? Wow,
Uh-huh.
these guys are good. And then you eat the fruit and then you ingest that energy. You didn't even know any of this happened. All you think happened was, oh, wow, this master is psychic. They knew I was hungry. They knew I liked bananas and they tossed me a banana. That was profound. But really, what happened is all of that. Plus, they charged the fruit and, you know, they're trying to give you a little boost.
Oh wow.
So we
Oh wow.
sometimes so people that are particularly charged with this energy, like people like me, but that do it in a more structured, formal way, will sometimes sell malas charged with that energy, so that you can kind of receive that energy more directly, or they'll send a certain type of seed, or they'll send certain objects that are charged like that. Um, yeah.
Can
Uh,
can you charge my mala? Can you charge it?
um, yeah, I tend to do it more directly. So I tend to just I do it in a direct, non-conscious manner. So just by talking to people, people tend to have experiences of just this energy sometimes kind of sparks off, even across distances. It doesn't matter that we're not in the same room, for
Yeah.
example. So this energy will
Yeah.
just in the background, kind of just on its own, spontaneously spark off a little bit, and it may or may not be noticed or detected, but I do believe there's something going on with that, because enough people
It
I've
is.
talked to have had certain experiences that makes me wonder.
I get a little shiver, a little, yeah,
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
did that, a little chill. I learned of that from doing Reiki distant healing over the internet. And I was just always amazed. I was just always
Yeah.
amazed by by the whole thing.
And I've experienced that myself. I've experienced transmitting it to people and having it transmitted to me non-locally. So I know that you don't have to be in the same room or touching each other for that to happen. I know that it can somehow non-locally, just like Reiki talks about, where there's this higher level. If we tune into frequencies like gratitude, for example, there's a higher level you can tune into where there's this non-local transmission can occur, or even just thinking about somebody, or like talking to their higher self, if you will. You can kind of have different intense experiences this way that are hard to debunk sometimes. So it definitely makes you wonder, because I'm coming from this kind of radical non-dual community, but I still do like to talk about this stuff too, because nobody seems in the non-duality community wants to touch any of this stuff. If they're transmitting the message of non-duality, a lot of them will try kind of shy away from the energetic experiences or talking about some of the complexities of a lot of these things. But I think it's interesting. It's interesting enough to talk about,
We have to have some fun while we're here. Yeah. It's funny, the non-dual thing was first presented to me back in the 70s. I was living in California at the time. A lot of meditations and the Beatles and Maharaj. Was it?
Yeah.
I can't remember the name.
There's a bunch of them. Yeah. There's Mahesh Yogi, Maharaji, Neem Karoli Babaji, all those.
Yeah.
And there's so in 1965, there was a book written by, I think he's an Irish fellow or a Scottish fellow, but he under the pen name Wei Wu Wei. In 65, he wrote a book called The Open Secret, which kind of talks about a lot of this stuff. And then in 1995, exactly 30 years later, Tony Parsons wrote Open Secret. And that's the book that our community kind of received this very clear way of expressing all this. And people have been kind of using that type of wording and terminology ever since. We haven't really had another wave of a restructuring of the language of this type of thing. But I actually encountered the message of people talking about that type of message indirectly. So I actually, for the past 7 years or so, I've been kind of drenched in that type of language without knowing that it came from Tony Parsons, for example, because I heard it everywhere and just assumed like, oh, the community is kind of, but then after my awakening, I started tracing things back to see, where do these words come from, obviously. And 1995 was a pivotal moment when Tony Parsons came out with Open Secret. And so, people tend to talk about it in that way because it's a very carefully put set of words. So it's kind of bold and reckless for me not to always use them.
I'll take a look at that. I never came across that. Medicine of One is a website that reads these books, presents all the audio books. Nisarga Dada Ramana. He's playing in the other room right now. I can't find my remote to turn it off. And the reading said that you have to meditate, wake
up. It depends on how you define meditation, because really, like the most advanced forms of awareness cultivation are actually forms of non-meditation. But I don't think you need to meditate specifically. Again, it depends on what you mean by that. Some people can arrive at this just through contemplating. Some people can arrive at this doing absolutely nothing. Some people arrive at this having done years and years of intense meditation. The people who do wake up tend to have tried everything, it seems like, or at least had the drive to want to try everything they could to finally end the suffering and the seeking. But no, you don't have to meditate to wake up. Um, I didn't when I was younger. I did a lot of kind of trance-based meditations and chakra-based meditations, Kundalini type meditations. I did Zen types of meditations, Tibetan and Kriya Yoga type meditations. I think it's different for each human, but you don't need to meditate to wake up. It's kind of it's just trying to become as aware as possible of everything, and not in a conceptual word-based way, just on a almost like an animal level of being, just to become as aware of the room around you as possible, for example. Not necessarily thinking in words, just trying to become as aware of the room around you as possible, I think is a very helpful tip. And one way to do that is, you're trying to magnify the intensity of your focus and your awareness. But one way to do that is to focus on a single point and not move the eyes. It helps focus the mind. But it's also helpful to become aware of the entirety of the peripheral view as well, and to just see everything all at once, to hear everything all at once, and to try not to have the mind interpret and judge and think and use words on it, to just have the raw input streaming in unfiltered. Uh, but I think for most seekers, it's very hard to shut the chatting mind up, the internal dialogue. I think a lot of people struggle with that. But if you can do it, you can kind of experience liberation for a few seconds at a time, at least. You're finally free from the incessant chatter of the seeking dualistic conceptual mind for a moment. In between our words and our thoughts and our behaviors is the awakened state. It's just usually only for a few seconds, unless you enter into, the flow state or something like that. But then you snap out of it and you're back to suffering again. So there's really no method or technique, even though the people that do arrive at this tend to have tried a lot of different things. We can't really pinpoint what will work for each individual, though. And so there's really no method we can prescribe for anybody. All we can do is describe what it was like, and hopefully that resonates enough somehow to hopefully induce the shift in others. But even that's the wrong set of words. But some people are wired for this to happen, and on different levels. And it tends to be people that are fairly intelligent and yet suffering very deeply, and who are just they want this to stop, the suffering, the seeking. And yet, on the other hand, we don't have to necessarily awaken to enjoy our lives. I think the main purpose is to enjoy. And or as I used to put it, I say, go ahead and try to enjoy your life as much as possible before we all die, and because we're all gonna die.
Yeah.
The body will anyway, right? So you're not, even if there's something that continues on beyond death, you're never going to be this human again. And so we owe it to this human in this one lifetime to directly enjoy this one lifetime as this human as much as possible. And so the purpose of life, even though there isn't one, whatever you say it is or isn't, there isn't really one. But if there was one, it would be to enjoy. And awakening definitely can help that, but awakening is also bittersweet. And so it's kind of neutral. So yes, suffering does end, but it's kind of neutral. It's not particularly passionate. And yet, so again, the purpose is to enjoy. And if you can wake up and that'll allow you to enjoy, that's great. And if you, for some reason, even if you can't wake up in this life, you can still enjoy it. So really the main purpose is to fully enjoy every little thing as much as possible. And it's really the little things that are most enjoyable, you know. So Eckhart totally talks about the pain body, but I'd really like to talk about the enjoyment body, because we could talk about what to avoid, yada yada, but it's more important to focus on the positive side of things. Not that there's positive and negative, just like if you
Yeah,
focus
I'm
on what you don't like, you're just going to be dragged into that more. And if you focus on what you do like, you're going to be dragged into that more. So the more you can enjoy, the more you can enjoy, the more you can enjoy, the more you can enjoy.
yeah, about 15 years ago or so, I was at the stove, either cleaning or cooking or lighting a cigarette. And I realized I was cause of all my own suffering.
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
all
exactly.
it's so stupid.
Yeah,
And I just started laughing. And
yeah, exactly. It's kind of funny. So people, from the awakened perspective, I'll be walking down the road, and most everyone I encounter is like direct evidence of the fact that it's very clear and evident that all suffering is self-imposed. Everyone's trying to tell a story where they are trying to convince themselves and others that they exist because they're suffering so much, that's why they exist, because they're suffering. So you don't understand how much I've suffered. And it's like a reinforcing, and that makes me real.
yeah.
You're not. But that's the mechanism goes, you can't tell me I'm not real. Look how much I've suffered. And it's like, well, it's just the dream trying to show you that you're real when you're actually not. It's just trying to help you feel real within a virtual reality. And all
Mhm.
realities are virtual. There's no such thing as a real world or an unreal one. um, it's just the experience of it. And why not enjoy? You don't have to do anything, but that part of us that thinks it's a person and thinks it's suffering wants that suffering to end. And usually, and sometimes the mind will tell itself things like, well, I should kill myself and that'll end it. And it's like, well, kind of, but it's not the
Yeah.
body you need to kill, it's the sense of self. A certain program running in the brain that really has no business being there any longer. And that's all it is. That's the only problem, is that there's this weird software running telling you have a problem within
Mhm.
this perfect everything, within this dream. So yeah, it's kind of a paradox, because you would think on the one hand that the entire purpose of life is to awaken before you die, and yet the main purpose for that is so that you can then enjoy the remainder of it as much as possible. But really, if you can also bring yourself to enjoy life fully without awakening. So you don't necessarily need awakening to enjoy your life. Hell, you don't even necessarily need to enjoy your life.
Many people enjoy their suffering and their misery.
Yeah, that's the thing. Most people don't want to actually hear the message, because usually they don't know it. Obviously you know it, but most people don't realize that what they're doing is actually, they want to suffer. That's the part of the reason they seem to exist, as a self, not as a human, as a self, as a
Mhm.
separate person, which is very different from being a human body, fully capable of everything a human body is capable of. But yeah, it's kind of like, the best way I can explain it, like if somebody had depression, and I know because I used to be there. But if you get depressed enough, you'll reach a
Me
level where
too.
all you
Yeah.
want is to become more and more depressed. You'll reach a point where literally what you want and everything you're doing is geared towards suffering more and more and more. It's like a tunnel vision of, the
Mhm.
more depressed you get, the more you, for some reason, you have this urge, this desire to be even more depressed, as if it'll justify and explain and promote and show that your suffering is real, yada yada. It's all bullshit. It's all self-generated. And yet it's hard to stop doing until awakening occurs. But it's good that you're aware of all these things and you can clearly express all that, because it's going to help you enjoy your life more, to be aware of all that. If you know it's all self-imposed, you also know it's all make believe on a certain level, so you don't have to take it
Yeah.
seriously. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a there's a
Yeah.
lightness, there's a freedom and a lightness, and it's not so heavy and dark and serious anymore. It can be kind of comedic even.
It is. It's hilarious. When I started the course, I used to say the ego is hilarious. It's like watching a cartoon.
It
It's
is.
the
Yeah.
Tasmanian devil, you know.
Yeah.
And if I could
Yeah.
step back and watch it,
You know,
yeah,
but that's the main thing is like, I see this a lot in A Course in Miracles students, especially even advanced practitioners of it, where they flip-flop
yeah,
between I see that everything's clearly okay, everything's fine, and then they'll experience tremendous sadness or anger out of the blue, and then they'll be kicking themselves like, well, I'm supposed to be beyond this.
yeah. That's what I
And
was doing in the beginning. Yeah,
that's the thing, A Course in Miracles has a lot of great gems of clarity in there, but there's also a few things that I've read in there that doesn't fully jive with this clarity. I think if you really want to trace it back, you could trace it back to what Jesus actually said. He wasn't talking about sin and redemption.
yeah,
He wasn't ever. He knew what I knew. There's no choice. How could you blame them? They know not what they do. There's no doer. How could you blame them? He didn't hang around
mhm,
with the purest, most
yeah,
pious
yeah,
people. He hung around with the burglars and the prostitutes and the homeless people and the thieves in the night. You know what I mean? That's who Zen masters really are um, hanging around with, because
uh-huh,
it's people that need. Enlightenment requires you to lose everything, including yourself,
yeah,
including you. And who wants to do that? Well, the people that are at the very bottom usually, right? People that have, yeah, well, we want to do it, but part of us doesn't want to actually go through it all, losing everything, everyone, every idea.
so everything in the life has been gone, and I'm still here. Now all
Yeah.
I have to do is get rid of the rest of, and there's not much left. I know there's not
If
much
you
left.
even have to do that, right? That's something that people talk to me a lot about. They say, well, how much me is left? Can
Yeah,
you sense it? How much is left of me? There is no me.
there isn't. When I go in my head to look around, I can't find any me.
There
I see
isn't
the
one ever
I
in
see the
anything. That's the
observer
thing.
watching the things going
Yeah.
on, and the awareness watching the observer, and then
Yeah.
this awareness watching the awareness watching the observer, and
Yeah.
ad infinitum, and there's nothing in here.
Yeah. 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 And so people will say things like, well, how much me is still left in here? Can you tell? And it's like, listen, there never is one, ever.
There never was and never is,
There never was
and
one. There
there
never
never
there
will
never
be.
can be one. Yeah. There never can be one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because of the nature of reality, there never can be two of
yeah,
us. And yet it's nice that there seems to be two of us, that we can have a conversation, etc. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that the point of life? To have it
yes.
seem like there's more than one of us? Yeah.
And then
So the seeker is trying to escape duality, and the sage loves duality. Like, oh, look at all this duality. It's beautiful. It's colorful. It's rich.
yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I've come from an I've done a lot of art in my life, and I've always seen the world as so beautiful,
Yeah.
and tried to share that with people. And I think that's how I was never a seeker. I was never looking for God. I was pissed off at God. He
Yeah.
didn't exist. Jesus was my hero always. So I said to Jesus, he doesn't exist either, but I didn't know it then. But I said to him, okay, Jesus, I love you. I'm yours, especially after my son died. I said, I don't want this life anymore. You can have it.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll leave the God thing to you because I don't get it at all. I don't know where I went with this. I'm lost with it.
A good thing.
Anyway, that's when I realized I just wanted to know what was going on.
Yeah. That's the thing.
That's all. That was
That's
the
what
thing.
the real seeker wants to know. The true seeker, and there's different types of seeking, right? There's the seeking that wants to end suffering and experience enlightenment, just
Yeah,
to end the suffering is the main thing. Not that it's too hung up on the enlightenment thing, which is nice, but it just wants to end the suffering. And on the other side of the seeker is that they seek knowledge. In other words, they want to know what's going on, whatever it is, and to not be afraid, and to realize that, listen, I want to know the truth. I want to know what's actually going on, regardless of what it is.
Yeah.
And from that perspective, you can kind of bypass the normal fear patterns that would keep you from seeing what's going on. And yet it's also impossible for the mind to strategize in order to see it, because it's kept hidden from the mind at all times until awakening. And
Uh-huh.
So you might interact with a 3-year-old and treat that 3-year-old as your guru, and
Oh yeah.
you might actually get somewhere, because that 3-year-old is in the awakened non-dual state.
Yeah.
And if you're a grown adult who's not awake, you're not. Even though
Yeah.
it's there at all times, you are it at all times. The conscious mind is not consciously aware of it. And so it's not
Uh-huh.
until the conscious mind becomes consciously aware of it spontaneously that we might call it awareness of awareness. Or really, the way it presents itself is that suddenly, for the first time in your life, or at least that's how it occurred here, was that
Yeah.
suddenly I was aware of this background awareness, almost like it's right behind me, and that it's aware of me seeming to be aware. In other words, that background impersonal awareness that we all share
Yeah.
and that I call nobody, it's still something. It's just not a thing. It's not in time or space. It's not a someone, but it is
Mm-hmm.
awareness. And we do all, it seems to indicate that we all share this background awareness, and that it's actually what's aware. It's not the character that's aware, but the
Yeah.
character seems to exist, seems to think that it's thinking, it's not. Seems to think that it's aware, it's
Yeah.
not. It's kind of like a computer character. If you see a little character on the screen in a video game, it's not actually experiencing anything. You are. You're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing the little seeming character seemingly seeming to experience things, and you're getting
Mm-hmm.
enjoyment from that, even if the character's in distress and it's about to die and it's struggling and it keeps dying, yada yada, or whatever, or it struggles to find whatever it's looking. You're still enjoying the fact that you're playing the whole time.
Yeah.
It's just not the person enjoying it. The
Yeah.
person is probably
Yeah.
screaming up at the heavens going, why for big chunks of it. But the awareness is enjoying that too, because it's
Yeah.
not real. It's just part of the video game.
I first got a feeling for that doing artwork. I was at the time doing pottery, and I made this big bowl, which the president of the art league bought right out of my hands as I brought it into the gallery.
Wow.
When it came out of the kiln, and I sat there and I looked at that and I said, I didn't do that. I knew I didn't do that.
Yeah.
It just happens.
Right.
And I used to call myself at the time, because ceramics is very meditative and very Zen and Buddhist.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
I called myself, they said my religion, I said I was a ceramicist.
I like that. And that's something that's overlooked often. People talk about Zen meditation, and I usually tell them, listen, take up knitting or pottery, or it doesn't matter. It's all
Yeah.
Zen. If you can do
Yeah.
something that it's the same thing as Zen meditation, why not? It's a form of
Yeah.
Zen meditation. Yeah, definitely.
So that was my, and then back in my 20s and early inkling, when I had to go to the museum to see a Malevich painting, and he was strict, and came back to class, I felt the power that came through the painting. And when I got home, my 3-year-old son left with the neighbor. I always left him with markers and paper. He had drawn crosses all over the paper. So there was the connection just flowing right through me, to him. And the instructor said, did anybody feel anything? And I said, yes. And I go, oh, this is a portal.
Yeah,
It's a
it's like
portal,
the way I
and
explain it is
yeah, all
paintings are like
art
living
is
things, you
showing
know.
that.
They're like a living
Uh-huh.
being you can interact with, and they're, even though the painter is dead and it's hanging on a wall, it's like a living thing that's still
Wow.
evolving, and you're projecting energy into it, it's projecting energy out, you're projecting
Wow.
meaning into it, it's projecting meaning out. There's a lot going on there, but it's a lot like a living thing because so many people are interacting with it, especially a famous painting, right? So many people are interacting with it
Yeah.
energetically and meaning and awareness wise, that there's an exchange back and forth, and it becomes this like
Ooh,
living
wow,
thing.
that's given
Yeah.
me, yeah, thank you. It gives me the, ooh, amazing, amazing.